is it is so controversial amongst framers and builders. Like, people are either into it or they absolutely disdain the whole idea and want nothing to do with it. That's been my experience anyway.
Oh yeah, if I want to start an argument on Facebook, all I have to do is post an advanced framing article.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Deputy Editor Matt Milham.
How's it going?
Digital Brand Manager Rob Watsack.
Hey guys.
And our producer Jeff Rose.
Hello.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it's a pleasure to see you guys this morning. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you too, man.
So Rob, have you finished your siding yet on your porch?
I mean, my 2-month siding project that is only like
well, I wasn't going to jump
feet.
right into being critical of how long this has taken you, but since you, that project.
Yeah. So siding phase is done.
It looks great.
Thank you. Yeah.
We should tell folks you got vertical shiplap pine that you stained dark gray.
Yeah, it's just like the standard slate color that the Home Depot Bare deck stain comes in. So it's a translucent or a semi-translucent stain, so you can see the grain and the knots through the wood. It kind of looks like a weathered barn, unfinished barn wood.
Yeah, it looks pretty natural, like it's just been sitting there for years.
Yeah. We're not sure if we're going to do a second coat. It looks very natural right now. We're going to kind of just wait it out, and maybe if we want it to darken up later, we will. But we're just going to leave it for now.
So once again, we should tell folks you have this vertical siding up, and then you left the space. 8 or 9 feet up on the wall for a porch roof. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the back of my house is a 2-story gable, the gable end of the house, and covered with vinyl siding. And I could never afford to re-side this whole house, but this is one of the few places where we spend time right up against the house. It's a nice stone patio there. We have a big dining table there. We have our garden there. And so I was like, you know what, rather than just being frustrated that I don't have a pretty wall to look at, I'm just going to make a partial pretty wall. And the way I'm going to terminate that is by building a 6-foot deep porch roof over our back stoop, and then also to create an area for my barbecue grill to be out of the weather. So it'll be sort of like a design element, kind of like how you see a lot of people. Typically seems like city people who buy farmhouses and then they build these like modern additions off the back. Well, mine is sort of like a micro modern addition off the back of the house.
I think we should coin that term for widespread use.
What is it?
Micro modern addition?
Yeah.
And this is going to be a foray into timber framing for you, right? You're going to timber frame the roof. Is that the plan?
Not quite a timber frame. It's going to have two posts and a beam that hold it up. Originally, I was going to do brackets off the house, but that was just starting to worry me a little too much, and I didn't want to have to get into reinforcing the wall or worrying about the shear of the fasteners and stuff. So I've got 2 footings already from an old pergola that I used to have, and they fall just in the right locations. So I'm just going to use those old concrete footings, put 2 6x6 posts up, and a double LVL 9.5-inch beam across the span.
What's the roof treatment you're planning on?
I already ordered the same. You guys know I love metal roofing. I would if I have a choice, I'll use nothing but metal. And I ordered a black. I forget what they call it. It's the stuff that's not true standing seam, but it has sort of like every 10 inches, it has a little hump in it that gives you the same look from a distance as a standing seam roof. And it's just a black enameled roof order. The nice thing about that stuff is that you can order the panels pre-cut to what you need. So you literally just throw them up there and drive some screws and you're done. It's so nice.
It is. And the pieces are light, and you just have to make sure your building is square, because they don't work if you have ask me how I know.
Yeah. In fact, even if the building isn't square, like my shed wasn't square, and you just got to find a square reference line on the ridge or wherever, and you just need to overhang that first panel perfectly on that square line. Otherwise, your whole layout, like you get this step effect on the bottom of the panels.
Yeah, it looks bad too. What have you been working on, Matt? Have you been building a porch?
No, I'm not working on anything like that. No, I've just been working in the garden, really. Just trying to get all the old stuff out and get ready for garlic. That's it.
And
Not exciting.
how's the compost doing? Have you been keeping track? Is it steaming in the morning?
It has been steaming in the morning. It's hanging around 140 degrees. It's definitely gone down because it's like, I don't know, it was like 20
You might have to
degrees
take
this
shelter
morning
in
or
that
something.
compost pile if you have a prolonged power outage and a cold snap, right?
Yeah, no,
You gotta like,
yeah, it's like, what was it, like in Star Wars when he slices open that bantha or whatever it is and sleeps in it? That's what I'm going to do with my compost pile.
Don't they heat greenhouses with like channels of compost running down the middle?
There are people that do that. They'll just have their compost in the greenhouse and it keeps it warm in the winter.
That seems like a great idea because then it's where you use it too.
Yeah.
Yep.
You need to run some earth tubes under your house, then build an auger system to drive the compost into this tube underneath your house, and that'll heat your house.
Yeah.
You should be all over that, Rod Wozak. Jeff, what have you been doing? I guess you haven't been painting because it's been kind of cold.
No, I actually you put all the ladders away and it's all done except for the 6-inch spot that I missed. It's like once the sun hit, it's like, oh crap.
Oh, that's the worst. So is it least easily accessible or is it way up? Okay.
Yeah, I think it was the transition from getting off the step ladder to doing it from the ground. So
yeah, and
white
it's
on white.
Always after you've cleaned up that you notice.
Yeah. So next warm day, 2 minutes.
That's cool.
At least with white on white, you kind of have an excuse. There's this commercial building. It's an old house that's converted into a store 2 blocks from my house. They painted the rundown old white building this really nice, rich blue color a few years ago. And then like they got up to the top of one corner of the wall on one side of the house and they left like a 20 square foot patch of it unpainted. And it still is to this day like that.
That kind of stuff drives me absolutely crazy. Like, how long would it have taken to finish that? And why not just finish it?
They probably ran out of paint.
Or something. Or the ladder wasn't tall enough or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one piece of fascia. It's like, I don't know, 15 inches. I can't get to it without getting really involved and complicated.
The back of my parents' house was pretty high off the ground. So it was 2 stories and then a probably 8 or 10 foot tall attic gable. And then the walkout basement was at least 10 feet. It's pretty hilly in Pittsburgh. And I remember my dad painting the gable end of that when I was just a little kid. And he's got this like 4-inch paintbrush on like a 5-foot piece of broom handle, right? That is like clamped on there. And he's trying to paint this fascia board. I don't know how that worked out.
Yeah.
Can't see it from my house.
All right. A few years later, they covered everything with aluminum trim coil. So my guess is it looked like heck. So I took my weekend this past and took I took an opportunity. So I took down a wall cabinet, and we had this base cabinet that was part of the kind of laundry telephone booth. And it was 12 inches deep, this base cabinet, and clearly it had been a wall cabinet because you could tell that they had added a kick space on the bottom and screwed a piece of countertop to the top. And this isn't all that uncommon for people to do who don't have enough money for a normal 24-inch deep base cabinet, right? And it was the perfect spot to put the family calendar and the telephone and that kind of stuff, and it's where we would charge our cell phones. But anyway, I took this thing all apart and I put it up on the wall above the washer and dryer. And, within an hour or 2, I had a pretty functional set of wall cabinets that I didn't have to make. So I am super stoked about that. And the cabinet that was over the fridge obviously is not normal 30-inch height. I think it was 18. Anyway, so I put a shelf under it and put my toaster oven in the space above. So it's got this kind of built-in look. And I don't know if that's UNL approved, but it hasn't burned anything yet. So I'm going with it.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that for my own toaster. We're trying to, with the new kitchen, get everything up off the counters. And I was like, if I built like a shelf for my toaster, do I have to align it with cement board or, tile it or, something? Because you can't find any reference to that being a safe installation,
My feeling, Rob, is that if you can put stuff on top of this thing, and you obviously can, like people are going to put at some point a loaf of bread on there by mistake and forget about it, right?
Oh yeah, my wife would put
So
like
it
paper
has to be,
towels up there.
yeah, it has to be safe for that, I presume. And they have like little standoffs on the back of it so you don't push it too close to something, right? Its design prevents it from making contact with stuff on the sides and the back. So
Yep.
I think it's safe.
Yeah.
As long as you have a little airspace above it, I think
Right.
I'm fine.
That's
Yeah.
probably like 3 inches anyway.
Sometimes you worry me, Patrick.
We're going to get all kinds of feedback from people telling me I'm an idiot and I'm going to burn my house down. And the insurance company's probably listening right now.
Oh, they're loving it. No.
I'm loving it. They're like
Just
drafting
thinking
an
all the
email as we
premiums they
speak.
get to raise.
So we had some great feedback, as is typical this time. This comes from Ted in Southborough, Massachusetts. Hello, podcast people. One thing I appreciate about your podcast is that I know you actually read all the mail/email that is sent your way. I just completed your survey, but found it lacking in my ability to provide feedback on what I want to hear. I started about episode 90, listened to all the back issues, and can't believe you are near 300. Thankfully, you've moved beyond the Fine Home Ceiling podcast. I'm a residential general contractor and home builder. I truly appreciate the quasi-expert advice you provide, the research you do before episode, and the easy speaking manner all of you have. Plus, you set the bar at experienced DIY, not newbie. Sometimes I do find myself yelling at the car radio when I listen that you're wrong, but mostly I find I learn something new each time I listen. I'd write more emails to you, but I'm driving, and by the time I've landed, I'm already on to the new thing. For the future, I'd enjoy hearing more integration between the magazine and the podcast. Your magazine has plenty of great, well-researched articles, but when I read them, I always have additional questions, etc. Perhaps 15 minutes of Q&A with the author to drill down deeper. Perhaps go over some of the articles that didn't make the magazine cut. As for magazine, there's often information that didn't make that cut too. Perhaps a QR code could access additional info online, including floor plans, elevations, other architectural documents, product specs, etc. I wish you all the success in what you do because it makes me more successful at what I do. Sincerely, Ted, Southborough, Massachusetts. Ted, thanks for that feedback. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Rob? How do we do a better job integrating our digital and print products?
Well, first off, I just want to say that I wish we could just hear when people are yelling at us from the other side of the
Oh, me too.
podcast.
That would make it much more fun.
So I don't know. I mean, it's between you, me, and the rest of the editors. We need to make a note when we talk to some of our authors. I mean, how big of a deal? I mean, I know we're all busy, but how big of a deal do you think it would be for you guys to add a quick interview thing that we could throw up on the website when you're doing a feature article? And that's your guys' department, not mine.
I don't think it would be that hard, and I think it would be really fun and useful.
I mean, whenever I promote some of our really great articles, I try to include the person's name in some of the descriptions, the contractor or tradesperson, whoever it is. I think it'd be awesome if you go to their author page, if we could get, if we had something like that for them, so people could see like, oh, this is why this guy's the expert for this article,
Yeah, and folks could ask their own questions there. They wouldn't have to go through us, right? They could, and I'm sure if one person has a question, I'm sure there's several folks at least with the same question.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see people send those questions in if they have them, because I mean, that could direct, us to maybe a new article that we maybe hadn't thought of, or, a lot of times stuff just gets cut for space. Not every article can be sort of like the end all be all of whatever, of that particular
subject,
topic. Yeah, we're going to hit it again, hopefully. But, if we know what people still have questions about, sometimes we can just answer them in email. I mean, that happens all the time. Like we know the answer, we've already done the research and everything for it. We don't need to go digging around for it. But it's something that maybe just, wasn't as important as something else. But I just like to see people actually send those in. I mean, we could even answer them on the podcast if,
well,
yeah,
if we wanted.
Well, I just made a note to add a field in the survey for people's content, topic suggestions. So we'll at least do that.
I want to remind folks to please send, any feedback, any questions, whatever, either the podcast or the, editorial mailbox. And, it's very valuable to have that information and those follow-up conversations for everybody, right? It's, good magazines have good letters and they run them because smart people take the time to do that and provide very good feedback almost always. Occasionally we get some cranks. We welcome them too. Those are kind of fun.
Those are really fun. Those are my favorite. Unhinged emails. More of those, please.
This is from Tyla. Tyla has a very long email, but once again, it's good stuff. So bear with me, folks. I'll try not to choke on my
read
words.
This whole thing?
Do you think I should not?
I don't know. It's really. I didn't even read the whole thing.
I think. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, here, I'll get it started, and then I'll tell folks if they want to learn more with Tyla's experience with radiant electric panels to go on the podcast page and read more of it, because it's very interesting. I just finished listening to podcast 299 and was interested by the discussion of heating an outdoor space as well as spot heating a cold area in a house. You mentioned radiant heat as being more efficient and also mentioned electric panel heat. Well, I have firsthand experience with this since about 18 months ago when I installed electric infrared radiant heat panels in my basement ceiling, and I have to say they're working great for me. The rest of the house is heated by a forced air gas furnace, but the basement was always cold, which is nice in the summer but not so nice in the winter. It's a finished space, but it's normally only used when I have guests. So I didn't want to improve the ducting because I'd be heating it all the time, which seemed like a waste. Baseboard electric was not great because I have tons of shelving down there pushed up against the wall. And while I considered radiant in the floor heating, digging up the floor or even just adding insulation and electric mats seemed like a really big project. Finally, I stumbled across these panels, ordered them, and had them installed in the ceiling. They're about an inch thick and installed flush to the drywall, so it didn't really affect the ceiling height. It was a bit of an adventure, though, because I couldn't find a local distributor or electrician who had worked with them before, which is surprising since I'm in Toronto, which is a big city. Once they were in, though, the heat has been great. There you go. So we were talking about in a cold entryway, right? And then we were also talking about on the porch. And Tyler goes on to say that she hasn't seen them for ceiling applications in outdoor installations, but she's seen other panels.
Yeah, I've actually been looking into them a little bit more recently since we talked about them last, because there's two places. One, my daughter always complains about being cold, and there's no heat duct in her room, and she likes to close the door, which I tell her, that's not gonna get any heat in there if you do that. So I've been thinking, what can I do for a low cost electric heat in the room that's not that's safe and not obtrusive? And I don't know, maybe I'll look into putting one of these panels like above her bed or next to her bed. But
Tyla says she ordered hers from infraredheat.ca. She says they're a Canadian supplier, but they do have a bunch of info and photos if you're curious. And she also says if you want to search for these, you have to use the right terminology. And what does she say to call them? Anyway, I'll look for that too. One of you guys take over so I can look for what she calls this.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was looking them up too. And if you look like
she says, look for infrared heat.
Yeah.
And I think if you added electric, that would help.
Yep. There's one I found on a Home Depot website. They call it a radiant glass heat panel. So, because a lot of them are glass. In fact, the ones that I found, you can actually treat them almost like picture frames. You can have artwork in them, and they come in all different colors, or you can even have them as a mirror, which I think that's kind of nice. Put a mirror in your bathroom that's also a radiant heater when you're getting ready in the morning.
Huh. That sounds awful. I don't want to look at myself naked.
It probably keeps the steam off the mirror too.
Yeah.
You guys have been in the hotels where they have the heating element in the mirror and it keeps it fog free while you're showering. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's an expensive thing I wish I had.
I know in Europe those radiant heaters are more popular, and a lot of times they double as towel hangers. So
yeah, but those are hydronic, right?
No, they have electric ones too.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of the ones that I saw are hydronic, but yeah, I imagine they do have other ones too. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Wouldn't that be awesome to grab a nice hot towel? Oh man.
Yeah. Burn yourself on it.
All right, our first question comes from Anders in Sandpoint, Idaho. Thank you for bringing up the subject of advanced framing the other day. I'm using advanced framing as often as possible and was looking forward to hearing what you guys had to say about the subject. Too bad you got sidetracked about 20 seconds into it and got into what your wish list looks like for the upcoming holiday season. That's important stuff as well. Try again.
Yeah, I think you missed you were supposed to read that with some sarcasm, I think, Patrick.
Oh, I don't think so.
No? Okay.
No, I think Anders is totally into holiday gift giving and getting.
Okay. Good. Well,
okay, so someone go and tell me what your thoughts are on advanced framing.
Well, I will say Anders is in luck because we just launched the framing project guide, and there's a whole section on advanced framing with like a dozen or more articles.
Really? We've covered it a dozen times in Fine Homebuilding?
Yeah, the first time we ever covered it was a Joe Stiebrick article called "The Future of Framing is Here" that was from 2005, and there was, he obviously anticipated some skepticism. So there's some questions, because it's like, yeah, but what about shear strength? And so it says when sheathing with 1-inch foam, they're talking about the Midwest. It's popular out west for like foam sheathing, right? They were talking about how you could do strategically placed shear panels to deal with shear issues. Bouncy floor issues. If people are doing floor joists 24 on center, use thicker subfloor. In fact, Mike Maines even pointed out in one of his articles that like the Advantech and similar OSB sheathings are actually a lot stiffer than plywood, so they kind of make up for the difference of that bouncy feel you have. Some people complain about blocking and nailing for drywall and cabinets, and some people assume that nailing off drywall really firmly to your studs is going to make it better. But in fact, a lot of times from wood shrinking and swelling, you actually get more cracks. So doing floating drywall joints with clips or furring strips is actually in a lot of ways better. And also
this
certainly
is one of those instances where Ted is yelling at his truck radio right now. I'm pretty sure, Rob.
Oh, I know. Well, so here's the thing. Advanced framing is kind of like, you can kind of treat it like a list of options. You don't have to do all of it. Like just doing the corners. What is it? A 2-stud corner?
Yeah.
To reduce those cold corners is one thing you could do, or just doing like Mike Gerton just did an article recently about the band joist, rim joist headers.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. Yeah.
And so
we should tell folks what that is. Instead of building a header directly above the window opening, you put the header up in the floor system on the band joist, right? You either double up the framing members, or you put LVL in there, or rim board or whatever. And in many cases, that can eliminate the need for another header, right?
Yeah, and when you look at the header spans, I believe in the code, they're like based on that header being up there, as far as I know, or at least in contact with that top plate, because everything has to be nailed together in order to get that all the resistance that's supposed to be there. So if your header is down in the wall, you actually have to reduce your header, the allowable span of that header in the table. There's a reduction for it and everything. I don't know if people actually pay attention to that stuff. I don't even know if inspectors are paying attention to that, but.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I think two of the biggest concerns people seem to have with advanced framing is, if you eliminate a top plate, is having the nailing and the stiffness of the walls, and also getting either siding or drywall to sit flat on those long spans. And that's definitely a concern. I mean, it depends on what your wall finishes are or what your siding details are. I mean, if you're doing siding on furring strips on a vented rain screen, I don't know if that's as much of a concern, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's a mixed bag. I love some of the elements. 2-stud corners make a lot of sense to me. Ladder tees make a lot of sense to me. Single top plates make no sense to me. Like, who the heck wants to cut all their studs to length, right? It just doesn't. It's like, that seems silly to me. Stacked framing makes a lot of sense for a number of reasons. Like, it makes mechanical installation way easier, and it improves the stiffness of the building. So, I like some of the stuff. I think having to go to inch and an eighth or subflooring for tile and stuff is crazy. Like, why not just put a few extra joists in the places where you're going to have tile, for example? So, like you said, Rob, it's, you don't have to adopt all the strategies, but some are a good idea, I
Yeah.
would say.
I think what it comes down to is that it's a good concept for everyone to be aware of, because there's just so much waste in our industry. I mean, maybe you don't have to go to full all out advanced framing, but if you see at pictures of a lot of walls in complicated new homes, you see these like stacks and stacks of studs because people didn't want to plan things out in advance,
They
so they
just
just
didn't.
kind of throw a couple extra pieces of wood in there to fill up the gap, and then you got a whole section of wall with no insulation in it. So I think it's more a matter of, maybe not everyone's going to adopt advanced framing, but it kind of opens your eyes to a lot of the waste that's it out there, and you can probably pick and choose some details that might make your job a little bit more efficient.
I miss having more stuff to fasten things to in my barn. I think it would be, described as minimally framed, right? Because of a post-frame building is minimally framed. And
Yeah.
I'd like to have more ways to hang up shelves and cabinets and tools and that kind of stuff. In some areas of the building, there's an 1.5-inch foam layer on top of the girts. So like, it's very difficult to fasten to those anything heavy because it wants to just crush the drywall and the foam instead of having solid lumber to, squish against.
Well, Mike Maines, to that point in his article, says, I mean, if you're planning something in advance, just put blocking in where you need it. But obviously, you're talking about a situation where you've built this barn, maybe not planning everything out the way you wanted to, and then you want to add stuff later. And yeah, that's definitely a concern, I would say.
What were you going to say, Matt?
Oh, well, I mean, some people complain, or some of the arguments you hear against it are like, well, there's not as much wood. But a lot of the old houses, they were built with 2x4s, 16 inches on center. And a 2x6 is like 57% bigger than a 2x4. And most of these advanced frame houses or advanced frame buildings are built, with 2x6s. So you have more wood actually in the wall than you did with an old 2x4 wall, 16 inches on center. So strength isn't really a concern. And when you stack all that lumber up, you get additional strength from that. That said, if you do the double top plates, then you don't need to directly stack everything, and that's why a lot of people don't stick to the entire, like everything that comes with advanced framing, because that double top plate, having that there gives you some wiggle room to be able to move those joists and rafters around a little bit.
And I think even with a single top plate, you do have some latitude. You just can't move too far away from the stacking.
Yeah,
right?
I want to say it's 2 inches or something like that.
Yeah, that's my recollection too.
And to your point, Patrick, earlier about cutting studs to length, I mean, Mike Girton had an article a while back about why not just use 8-foot studs for framing in general, because then you've got this extra gap at the bottom that's just going to get covered with the baseboard. It kind of gives you a little more flexible room for, you'll hang drywall up, but you put the seam at the bottom. And
who the heck wants to tape a drywall seam like inches from the floor?
Well,
it's good. The issue is that it's just going to be buried anyway, so nobody's finishing it.
Yeah, but you should be taping it for fire prevention and air barrier, right?
The thing. Like you're going to lose your air seal. You're going to lose all kinds of things there. So it's not ideal.
I agree. It's not ideal. What do you think about this, Jeff? Are you a fan of advanced framing?
I like the idea of it, and I think the idea that it's a menu, it's not a prescription.
Yeah. Do you ever wish there was less lumber in your house? I bet you don't.
Only when I had an infrared camera for a little while.
Have you looked at your frame, Matt, with your infrared camera? Do you see big buildups of studs, on the sides of windows and what have you?
I don't see that so much. There is an inch of rigid foam on the outside of my house, so I don't have a lot of thermal bridging. But I do see issues basically all around the top perimeter of the walls because the insulation up there is terrible.
You think it's a leaky band joist?
No, it's basically just at that top plate, at the double top plate. And it's really just because the insulation isn't all the way out to, covering that plate. So it's somewhat exposed.
I forget that you have a single story home. That might be confusing people. So at the top of your walls, you have a ceiling joists, and that insulation is not getting out to the exterior walls.
Yeah, or even if it is, it's one layer of bad insulation,
Of mouse infested
and
insulation.
Right, and you can't really get 2 layers in there because it's 2x6 rafters, and they're just not deep enough to accommodate more insulation out there. So it's basically got as much insulation as it can, and it's not enough.
Well, Anders, I would be curious to learn how you're integrating advanced framing into your builds, and if you want to email me, and we could have another 13th article in Fine Homebuilding about advanced framing. It's been a while. The last one I remember is one I did with a builder in North Carolina, I believe, and.
Yeah, those dozen articles are including web articles, like features at the FHB houses over the years, that sort of thing, too. But that the nice thing about those is that you're getting more in depth into the actual practice of them as opposed to the conceptual articles like Joe Stebrick's.
It's an interesting subject. What I find most interesting about it is so controversial amongst framers and builders. Like, people are either into it or they absolutely disdain the whole idea and want nothing to do with it. It's been my experience anyway.
Oh yeah, if I want to start an argument on Facebook, all I have to do is post an advanced framing article. There's a couple of topics like that. That's definitely one of them. Every single time.
Poor Philip Hansel. Every time we show that painting article where he's painting an entry door and he's left the hardware on for very good reason, people go crazy about that too. They just lose their minds about that. I quit explaining what was going on there because the article explains why he did that, and people don't read it. They just see that and they go berserk.
Yeah, no, that's often the case. It's like, like you got to tap the sign, read the article.
Yeah. Anyway, this comes from Daniel. House, circa 1900, high post cape with enclosed porch and brick foundation in southern Maine. This is like Dateline. It was built as a seasonal quarters for brickyard workers. I've removed all the plaster, fiberglass, and mouse poop from the walls. The attic is going to be done in phase 2 next year. The full basement is dried by a dehumidifier, FYI. Questions. Can I have a wooden floor in my bathroom, legally speaking? I've got great plank floors and to just want to sand, poly, and put down some bath mats. I don't care about water stains, etc. 2, how can I shim out my rough sawn 2x4 walls to fit 2x6 windows and 2x6 Roxul bats? I'd like to use strips of rigid foam, but 2A, the building trades guy at my high school said I should use wood strapping over each strip to prevent the sheetrock from sagging. Really? How do I attach the electrical boxes? 3, does Rockwool make mouse nests? I hope not, because then it's spray foam time. Okay, what did the guy mean when he said it's really bad to heat up your house with propane heaters a few hours before spraying foam? It was really cryptic, and you guys basically just forgot about the riddle he posed to all of us. Okay, so a couple folks have pointed out when we just completely ignore a topic that we started out talking about. So let's go through these questions one by one. And then we'll get to the discussion about spray foaming with space heaters, okay?
I feel like you should strategically plan one of those riddles and just kind of sneak it in every episode, Patrick.
To see if people are paying attention, Rob?
Yeah.
Don't tempt me. Can you have wooden floors in your bathroom? Of course you can. Why not?
Well, I would actually check with your local building inspector because we had one fight us on that once in a house. And
I welcome any building inspector who's listening or any person out there to show me the code section that says you have to have something. You can't have wood floors in your bathroom. I don't believe it.
So what he did is he made us put extra coats of polyurethane on and do some caulking around the flange for the toilet to prevent any possible water damage.
I'm blinking because who the heck does that even with a tile floor? It's going to leak there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, but we had a fight.
I would say leaving a bath mat down on it all the time is going to, you're definitely going to have mold under there 100%, pretty much, unless you've got
I don't know. It depends on the
moisture
content of your house. Sure, if you make the mat soaking wet and leave it there all the time, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, I'd say definitely a wood floor like that. It's just something you got to keep an eye on. You got to make sure you do a really good finish on it, and then don't
I've
wait
had
too.
a wood floor in one of my bathrooms in my Stowe house. The only issue I had with it is we had a well, and the water coming out of the well was very cold year round, right? And we had a 3-gallon toilet tank, and when it would sweat, it would drip onto the floor, and it got some water stains between boards. But other than that, it was fine. It was fine.
I lived in a 200-year-old house once where the bathroom had mushrooms growing on the wood floors.
How can I shim out my rough sawn 2x4 walls to fit 2x6 windows and 2x6 Roxel bats? Okay, one word, bonfiglioli.
Yeah. Yeah, I think his trade school guy is correct that, that's going to sag if he doesn't, have some sort of furring on top of that. I mean, just because one, you're going to have to use really long screws. And if that drywall isn't in contact with the floor, supporting that from deflecting it all, those screws probably will deflect over time.
I mean, I don't know if sagging is definitely a given, but certainly it'd be
it's not necessary. But
certainly it would be a lot easier to fasten to furring strips than 3-inch drywall screws and trying to hit the studs.
For those of you who are not familiar, the Bonfiglioli wall system uses, in his incarnation, 2x6 studs, a 1-inch strip of foam, and 3/4-inch strapping on top of the foam. And he fastens the foam strips to the strapping ahead of time before installing them on the studs with a roofing nailer. And then he gets a 3.5-inch heavy-duty nail, drives it through the strapping into the studs, and puts these little strips up that gives him deeper stud cavities and provides a thermal break for these extra deep cavities. And I think it's a perfect solution, Daniel, for what you're trying to do. And Rob Yeaget has done this in the attic of his house. If you listen to old podcasts, he describes doing this. And gosh, it's one of the most common sense assemblies I have ever seen. I love it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did in my attic too, except I did rips of plywood because then I could get them a little bit wider to have a good nailing surface. And I also just felt like I was less likely to split than with furring strips. But it just makes every step of the process much easier, even though you're adding a material in there, just attaching the foam with screws through the plywood, through the foam into the rafters or studs. It just makes a whole lot of sense.
Well, if you're trying to get this done with any rapidity, that's not his emphasis. He likes to make things, and he likes to enjoy them, let's say. You can use a nail gun, and that's fine and much faster.
Yeah.
It's funny that 3-page article has generated more conversation and interest than anything I can remember. Would you guys agree with that?
It probably comes up more than just about probably more than anything else that's ever been in the magazine.
Crazy.
How do I attach the electrical boxes?
That's in that article too, right?
That's in the article too.
Yeah.
Little squares of 3/4-inch ply attached to the side of the studs.
So you nail those to the side of the studs, and then you use a nail-on box and just nail into the plywood instead of the foam would be what you were trying to nail to if you didn't put the plywood boxes squares up there, right, Matt?
Right. Yep.
So if I ever build a new house, I'm going to do this. Daniel, I hope that's helpful. Oh my gosh, we almost skipped out on the discussion of warming the house with propane heaters before spray foaming.
Well, we had another question too. Does rock wool make good mouse nests?
Well, I was wondering that myself. I haven't gotten any answers on that. So anybody out there who's built with rock wool, please tell us if you've got mice living in it.
Everything I've heard is no, that they don't like it.
I do know there was an article, I think it was on GBA, where someone did an exterior rock wool, the comfort board insulation before they did their siding, and similar to the way I did the back of my house. And they said the birds loved making nests in it before they got the siding on. So that's a little different, but
yeah, I think Martin Holliday said that in the past too.
Gosh, you can never guess the weird stuff that's going to happen when you try something for the first time, right?
Yeah. Well, we know that, mice love fiberglass. I know that anyway.
Right.
I'm sure anybody who's ever been in an attic.
Anyone who's had pulled down fiberglass bat and been rained mouse poop, it makes an impression.
I almost feel like I need to, because there's a little section of where I'm going to be putting a cabinet against the wall, a new cabinet where my new rock wool insulation is, the bats. I almost feel like I need an inspection panel in that wall. Inside the cabinet, I'm going to make a little gasketed door with 4 screws that goes on there. And then, a year from now, I'm going to go in there and see if any mice have burrowed into it. How's that sound?
That's great.
Great, Rob.
I don't know.
So the problem with heating up propane heaters, I learned from Doug Horgan, is that the byproduct of combustion of burning propane is a lot of water vapor, and the sheathing is the coldest thing you're in the space, and so that's going to be the condensing surface, and so that water vapor condenses there and makes problems for the foam sticking.
Yep.
And slows the chemical reaction, I presume, too, because it's colder.
Oh, the sheathing would get colder, even though
Yeah, the sheathing is colder than anything else than it would be if you had heated the space that the surfaces were warm enough for spray foaming. If you're heating the air for even a few hours ahead of spray foaming, you're not really going to have time to bring those temperatures up to make them warm enough for the the reaction to fully complete itself.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, in general, any kind of combustion heater is that's not vented is going to produce too much water for the inside of a building, which can cause complications for a lot of processes. But also, I would say that you probably don't want to run a propane heater inside a closed house either, right?
No. Not without good ventilation, and then you sort of defeated the purpose.
People do it, but the assumption is that the house is not built and it's full of holes. Let's hope.
Yeah. Maybe we're going to start seeing radiant panel job site heaters soon, like those ones we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening, Rob, because you just need tons of hot air to, because you'd have to have those all over the place, right? You couldn't.
So you just need a wearable one, those Milwaukee jackets. That's the way to go.
That's what it is, right? That's like a radiant panel that you put on. Is it, or is it conduction?
It's conduction.
At least Jeff's got some science background here.
Oh yeah, we're just gonna trust his word on it. I don't see a science.
He's right?
I don't see a science degree on his wall back next to the blue dog.
I'm gonna make Jeff a doctorate of engineering diploma for his wall. Dear FHBP team, I have recently found your podcast and it has sparked a renewal of passion for the trades in my heart. For the past decade, I have built a small pool service company. Due to my family's health risk, we went from a 5-person team to just myself during the pandemic, reducing from 6 to 10 stops per day with fast food stores, suppliers, and customers' homes. I now make a handful of stops a week for pool leak detection. I've cleaned my first pool at 12 and managed a pool service company office in college. My certifications include PHTA, Certified Pool and Operator, PHTA Certified Service Professional, PHTA Certified Building Professional, Certified CBP and CSP Trainer. I don't know what any of those things are, but they sound amazing. While I've invested my heart in the industry, it has been hard to maintain a passion for it as one inevitably begins to see the flaws. In your recent interview episode, the guest commented that the biggest mistake they find when performing building inspections are when 2 trades meet. It was an instant revelation to why there are so many poorly built and even dangerous pools in the field. Pools are a collision of all building trades in a wet environment. Plumbing, electrical, and concrete, with outdoor living areas and pool houses growing in popularity, we've rounded out the picture. And yes, even insulation comes into play. The longer I spend in the trade, the more horrified I've become by the safety risk I find in the field. My favorite horror story was one of when my customers had self-installed the pool over a decade ago and was never able to get the light to work. In the process of diagnosing the 120-volt light, we discovered the owner had installed a standard junction box underground complete with wire nuts. This J-box was flooded at all times during the pool's life, wet niche light, on a non-GFCI breaker. We immediately informed the customer that they were very fortunate no one had been killed in their pool during the 10-year existence. Pools are deeply personal, often touching on financial and family pressures. The owner's first question was if they could swim with the breaker off. The answer is no, if anyone had doubts. I wish these situations were uncommon, but they are far too common. Some pool companies in our region will service unsafe equipment, which I attribute to not knowing the risk. FHBP has reassured me that I am not alone in the world and there are others fighting the good fight to improve and learn about their trades and the trades of others. While a cast iron clawfoot tub may not fall through the floor if a joist is severed, others like me know the risk is a risk a professional builder should never take. Feel free to reach out if you ever run into swimming pool leaks. If you pay attention, you will. 1 in 10 pools leak, according to an industry study. I'd love to reach out from time to time with weird pool stories, like the hot tub, which was in a converted bedroom, painted like Ario's grotto, with no precautions for the added moisture. We didn't get pics of it. The text said, I just wanted out of there. Thank you for the podcast, and thank you for helping me feel less alone in the trade world. That is a really, really nice email. Thank you. What do you think, guys?
So a comment on that is like, from back when I was working in remodeling, I think one of the biggest responsibilities of a general contractor is paying attention to those places where trades intersect. Like you think about heating systems and pools, obviously, and any time where you've got plumbers and electricians and different people that have to work on the same product. Because that you've got to just make it super clear whose responsibility it is to do each portion of the project. Otherwise, you get things missed. But then again, you can't. That's not going to prevent homeowners from
doing dumb stuff,
electric wires in the bottom of their pool. But
oh my God, it's a miracle no one was electrocuted, right? How did that not happen?
I don't know. I guess something was grounded just right.
Man.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
But this isn't really related, but it's related to that conversation about where trades meet. I stumbled upon some video last night on YouTube about these 2 barges with 2 cranes on them in the Netherlands trying to place a drawbridge in a little neighborhood drawbridge on a canal. And there was a contractor who was hired to do it, and a steel fabricator who built the bridge, and a rigging company that did the crane work. And it was like nobody had taken any responsibility for the safety things. And then the local town just wanted to kind of get the thing done. So they kind of fast tracked some of the stuff that they should have required. And sure enough, the minute they lifted this thing off the ground, one of the trains buckled because the barge started swaying and dropped 2 gigantic cranes on the roof of like 2 city blocks of buildings.
You have to put a link on our podcast page because I've seen this footage, and as you suggest, and almost immediately it goes completely sideways, and all this stuff tumbles into the canal.
Yeah, and the video I found is actually one of those videos of some engineering firm who did like 3D modeling, almost like in SketchUp, of the entire accident and go through step by step where the failures were with flow charts and everything. It's pretty fascinating.
Have you seen this, Matt?
I think I may have. I don't remember. I have seen quite a few like crane fail videos, but I don't know if I saw that one particular.
Surprisingly, there were dozens of people all over the barges and in the neighborhood streets filming it. And there's tons of videos of this, and nobody was hurt. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, because you can imagine the interest this generated when you're physically picking up a bridge with a pair of cranes. Like, of course, if you're in the neighborhood, you're going to pop your head out and watch this, right?
Yeah.
I would. Now I know there's going to be carnage. So I got an interesting email yesterday from the economist at Home Advisor. Did you see that, Rob?
Well, I took a quick look at the link that you shared.
Can you remember that gentleman's name who works for them?
No.
I'm embarrassed because he's been on the podcast. Anyway, I will look that up. And so they did some research on how much money people were spending during the outbreak on home repairs. And in 2020, total home spending among homeowners completing home projects was an average of $13,000 per household. And homeowners completed an average of 11 home service tasks or projects. The report has detailed dive into consumer spending, including highlighting how spending priorities and home needs shifted as a result of COVID-19. That struck me as a lot of money. Every freaking household in America spent $13,000 on home improvements.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously it's an average, and they said the average last year was $9,081. So it's $4,000. It's significantly higher, and I mean I can say I probably wasn't going to dive into my kitchen project, and that sounds pretty much on par with my. I must be right in the average area there because I'm several $1,000s up from previous years.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I don't think it's four, but it's at least two in my case. How about you, Matt? Have you spent more money
I
making
don't
your house livable?
know. I've probably done fewer projects this year than I have in the past, but I don't
Are you
know.
worried about cash?
Not really.
He's
You
just
know,
lazy.
I spent no, I
Just
bought
lazy.
All about
I've been
compost.
yeah, I've been spending money on other things. I bought two new cameras, like for work and pleasure.
Heather got a new
And those,
car.
yeah, Heather got a new car. Yeah, so I mean the money's been going sort of other places. It's not that I'm really spending less, but I mean I do wonder how much of that money is, going towards housing projects, maybe not on existing homes, but or maybe it is existing homes, but because of all the wildfires and things that we've been having.
Sure.
I know out here we had, a couple crazy windstorms. My neighbor just had a new roof put on their house because a tree fell on it in one of the windstorms and damaged a corner, and they kind of needed a new roof anyway, so they had a new one put on maybe 3 weeks ago. Um, I wonder if there have been a lot more incidents like that that have sort of driven some of this as well. For sure, people are, because they're home, they're taking up some projects, but I wonder if there's a portion of that is related to some of these disasters that we're seeing all over the place.
Well, I'm pretty
It
sure the survey was actually specifically focused on people who were doing,
Just home improvement.
home improvement projects. And point you made, Matt, is like you've spent your money on other things. I mean, if you looked at people who don't own homes, I'm sure because you figure a lot of people aren't doing vacations, so they've got cash that they maybe were going to spend elsewhere. Um, and but you figure people who are probably apartment dwellers or don't have homes to invest in are probably just finding other ways to sort of
spend their
refocus,
money.
spend their money that other than on their vacations that they're not having.
Right.
I've read many places it's all about home because there's nowhere else to go, and you're there so much. You want to make your life more livable, and you start to notice the things that are looking a little shabby because you're there all the time and they bother you more. So I totally get it from my own experience. I've certainly found things that just drove me bananas, but I didn't want to bother dealing with them. But now you got some time and you can't go anywhere. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff, what do you think about? Have you in your peer group? Have you heard of people doing stuff that they might not have otherwise done?
I think spending just a faster pace than they might have if they didn't have the pressures of being home all the time.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Matt?
No, I was just going to say. I lost my train of thought.
That's why I asked Matt.
Yeah,
I had nothing. I don't think I was going to say anything. Having a couple dogs, like new dogs, is also really sort of like put a dent in things because they require a lot of time.
Yeah, and that's nice though.
Yeah, no, it's been nice. They're fun. They're idiots.
You should tell folks that you sent a pretty funny short video of your dog licking the wall, right?
Yeah, she was like I think she was trying to chew through the wall. I'm not exactly sure what she was doing. She found a spot on it, and it was in a spot. This is something that I do need to address. I had, when I first bought this house, one of the first things I did was go around and rip all of this trim off. It was like this clamshell trim on around all the like the baseboards and everything. And I have replaced some of it, but not all of it. I did enough for like we had done a photo shoot in here when everything was still empty. And I never finished the baseboard. So there's this like spot at the bottom of the wall that's still open, and the dog was chewing on that. And I don't know why.
Trying to get at the mice.
Yeah, probably. That's probably exactly what it was.
Yeah, or someone spilled something there one time maybe, and it ran behind the baseboard. Is it,
The other thing I was thinking is because that part had the original paint on it, because this was the spot that was sort of like behind that baseboard, that old baseboard, and I was wondering if it was lead paint and it just tasted good, and she was just like, lead paint.
I've heard that that's the greatest risk with little kids, right? Is because the lead paint chips are sweet, I am told.
Yeah,
I'm sure I ate my share of them as a youth, but I don't really remember.
yeah,
It's funny, I remember, the big risk there is kids play on the windowsill when the windows are open, and like I remember running my Matchbox cars in that little track there between the stool and the storm window, and like, of course, it was full of lead paint chips, and that's what I blame my bad memory and focus on for the rest of my life.
yeah. I had probably the same thing growing up in a house that was built in 1880 or 1860, something like that. It was, I'm sure, just completely covered in lead paint.
And when you have an old house like that, I'm sure your dad was doing his best to keep up with stuff, but I can't imagine he was able to keep it all maintained at the same time, right?
Yeah, I mean, he grew up 2 doors down from that house, and I think it was sort of like a dream of his to, to own that house one day. And then as
Until
soon
he
as he
did.
and then as soon as he bought it, he was like, "This was a mistake." And he spent the next probably 13 years like trying to get out of it.
I love the story of you up there roofing on that house that had to have been, 35, 40 feet up in the air. It's just like, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it had quite the roof. I mean, the house is still there, but yeah, an 1812 pitch roof with what was it, one, two, three, four, six gables, like, double cross gable. It was crazy.
We had a email last episode. I don't know if you were on it, describing the double hipped twice double hipped roof. I don't know. So it was like a pyramidal hip roof with these huge doghouse dormers coming out in the center of them. So it had 8 hips, 8 valleys. It was quite a cool
Man.
roof.
Yeah.
Did your dad ever get that roof done?
Well, it was our neighbor and his longtime friend who actually did the vast majority of the work. Once we got up to a certain height, my mom was like, "You're not going up there anymore." And Frank Tavalia did the rest of it. That guy he's a machine. He's probably the best carpenter I know. So,
And he's still practicing the craft,
I think he's retired now. He's got to be 70, 71, something like that.
That would be really
I know he's still
rare
doing some
to be
work.
able to still do that at that
Yeah,
age, right?
I know he's still doing some work. I know he helped his son rehab a house, but I don't think he's doing it full time anymore.
I hope I'm able to help Liam rehab a house someday in my 70s. That would be pretty cool. And then I can just point and tell him to do things, which would be also very cool. So what's the next project around your house, Matt? Go first.
The thing I'm planning is to expand my garage so that I actually have room to use all these new tools I got, because everything's just kind of packed in there now, and there's no room to move without moving stuff out. So
So you gonna move an eave wall out? How's that gonna work?
I'm just gonna extend off that eve wall. I'm not even gonna make it the same height as what's there. Basically, it's gonna, sort of stretch out, sort of more like a New England style house, just multiple,
Uh-huh.
so it'll be big enough, to
Will you
operate.
make an opening in the existing eave wall to access through this, or will it just like be
Yeah.
kind of okay?
Yeah, so that's going to basically there's a window there now, and that window is going to go away, as well as some, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 feet on either side of it, and then I'll build an extension out that's probably, I don't know, I haven't gotten it all drawn out yet, but probably 16 feet or so.
Are you using posts and footings, or are you going to pour like a stem wall for this?
I'm hoping not to use a stem wall. I'd like to use some kind of like frost protected shallow foundation if I can, mostly because there's bedrock right there. I mean, really, I don't even probably need, traditional footings, just because I can get down to bedrock, I think probably about 2 feet down. So really, I only need to dig that far.
That sounds easy.
Would you
Yeah.
drill
Rob, what are
into
you
the
doing
rock?
next?
Would
What
you
was that?
would you drill into the rock to tie into it?
I probably would, just because why not?
Why not? What's your next project, Rob? You going to do that porch roof? Or you going to let that wait?
No, that's got to get done because I don't like the top edge of my siding being exposed, and I just want that whole back to be protected. I want to have a nice cozy. I want to keep the snow off of my stoop and have a place to put my grill before weather gets bad. So that's I'll probably order some materials for that today, and hopefully the metal roofing will be in the next week or so. But in the meantime, I got to start tearing up my cabinets. I was using a heat gun to strip some of the really crappy acrylic paint off that doesn't really stick that well anyway, because it's over old polyurethane and black, like brown stain. The original poplar face frames in the cabinets were like this dark brown, and the cheap paint we put on there when we first moved in the house just comes right off like in huge sheets with a heat gun. It's nice.
Are you are you going to repaint then with something more durable?
Yeah. I thought about spraying, but I just don't see myself getting ready to do all of it at once. So I am going to probably brush it on. So any tips for doing a really nice hard, solid brushed on finish? I was looking into some of the enamel like based paints that some of the better brands have that are supposedly really durable trim and cabinet enamel, and I guess I'm going to probably go with something like that. But honestly, I haven't really figured it out yet.
Okay. Well, we'll keep asking you about that because I'm interested to see how that turns out. I've learned you can't buy like natural wood cabinets anymore. Everything is painted seemingly from the major, cabinet houses.
Just because of what's in demand?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you can have them made, but like I checked the RTA suppliers and they all want to sell you white painted or gray cabinets. That's like the only offering I found at this one place yesterday. So not doing that. Jeff, how about you? What are you doing next?
Probably work down in the basement some.
Continue finishing that space?
Yeah.
Nice. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Thanks to Matt, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Oh, one other thing, folks, make sure you send in your emails describing which Fine Homebuilding contributor or editor you'd like to interview on a special edition of the podcast. That's going to be super fun, I think. And remember the Taunton store and your gift-giving ideas. The folks who like to work with their hands will find tons of cool things in there and get them something from there. It helps the business. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Stay safe and happy building. Keep craft alive, too.